We want to thank you very much for taking some time out with us this morning. And of course, do point out temperature-wise, we are starting to warm up, but only ever so gradually today. I was commenting earlier that we are looking for a high temperature by the end of the week in the 70s, mid 70s. One of these days we'll probably break that 80-degree mark, although that does seem like it might be still a few days out. In the meantime, we're going to be talking a little bit about some issues involving the city of Twin Falls, Idaho. Rebecca Milsoyko joining us again from the
Yes.
Twin Falls City Council.
Good morning.
Welcome back. 2 weeks in a row now.
Thank you. Yes.
You can go back and tell everyone else that you survived. And
That's right. I'll
Yeah.
tell them how great the show is.
Well, first of all, we want to mention too 1310 KLX, newsradio1310.com. You can hear us anywhere around the world online, and it's 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. Hey, right off the top, I know that there's a lot of discussion going on about a new police chief. I was going to actually go to a meeting last week to talk about with some of the city folks about what was going on, and we postponed that. We have had a couple of people who've dropped out of the mix. So I guess we're down to just a handful of names. Are we going to see a decision anytime soon?
That's true. Actually, this week, the city manager, Travis Rothweiler, made a decision that he was going to vacate the current process. So, no, there won't be a name coming out of this current process. They did have a couple of candidates withdraw, and that decision is just an appointment by the city manager, and so he made the decision that he didn't feel comfortable with the other candidates, and so they're going to start the process over again. They don't have a timeline currently. We do have an interim chief, so things are running smoothly, and they will continue to do the day-to-day work of the police department. So people don't have to worry about that, but they will kind of take a look at the process. It was a different process. It was the first time they had done this. They included a lot of different people from the community, from the council and staff. There were 3 different interview boards, really a lengthy and probably exhausting experience for the candidates. And so, out of that process, they might take a look at it and see what maybe they can improve upon. I know that there was kind of a pre-selection process that kind of narrowed the candidates down to the 4 that we saw as interview boards. And so that might be a part of the process that they take a look at and review and see how that selection took place, because somehow we ended up with a couple of or 4 candidates that we interviewed, and then out of those, they just didn't have someone that they felt comfortable with.
I was going to say, it's not necessarily a lengthy process, but you just go back through it again, get a small group like that together, and sit down with a few people. And once you finish that, it could be a few more months before we have a decision.
No, I think they're actually indicating that they're going to start over probably sometime after the fall.
Okay.
So they're not starting over right away. I think they're going to take some time to reflect on the process and create a new timeline, but we don't know what that is.
Things are in good hands, in other words, for the time being. Hey, I've got another quick question for you.
Sure.
I know you've got some things you'd like to talk about too as well. I got into this discussion with people on Monday during the course of the show, and I'm not a big fan of zoning regulations and saying you got to do this because government says so, and people have certain property rights we should respect. But I noticed it because I was, with the better weather, I've been out walking around a bit more in some of the neighborhoods, especially in the Old Town section of Twin Falls. And I'll walk by 4 or 5 beautiful homes that you can tell, these bungalow-style homes, 80, 90 years old, people have taken wonderful care of them. And they just have such a homey look to them. And then you'll come up across a couple of houses on the street. And as I was telling a caller the other day, I wouldn't put my dogs in those houses. And then, you'll get past those and another string of nice homes. But gosh, if I'm living in that neighborhood, I've got to be worried about my own property values. And I see more and more of these properties as I move around the city. Is there an effort at least to try maybe and shame some people into taking a little bit better care of some of these properties?
Currently, no. We kind of let people attend to their property the way that they see fit. But there is a code enforcement team, and so if there are some violations of city code, certain weeds at a certain height, um, you know, uh, vehicles that are unable to move that are parked for more than, I think, 24 or 48 hours. Those types of things. We issue citations and we go around and do code enforcement. And what's interesting is one of the ways that people have tried to enforce, like you're saying, certain standards of property maintenance is with their HOAs, with their homeowners associations and their different regulations. But what's interesting about that is that those are not enforceable by the city. They're just completely voluntary. Either the developer, the builder, or the homeowners association has to enforce those. And I think they kind of engage more in a social pressure sort of a situation where you try to encourage your neighbors to maintain their property in a way that you would like. But yeah, the city kind of stays hands off, which I think is a good idea.
And of course, the HOAs dominate the new housing going up along Pole Line Road and places.
Absolutely.
But I don't think there are too many HOAs when you get into the old part of the city, obviously in action. And the only thing I guess
Exactly.
to do is just to approach
Yeah.
neighbors and say, "Can you please do a better job with all of this?"
Absolutely. And or help out, I mean, there's a lot of organizations, Interfaith Caregivers is one of them. There's the City Youth Council. They've done some cleanup for people because some people are just disabled or elderly and they're just not able to do everything that they need to, or they don't have the finances. And so, man, I think that's an opportunity where I think that the spirit that we have in Twin Falls would really be to go and help that person out.
We have a caller with us. Rebecca Milsoiko is with us from the Twin Falls City Council, and this is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a friend that's called into the city several times for years. The neighbors had cars parked there, you said, for 48 hours. The city says they will not do anything, but if they find a weed on his property, like you said, they'll come out and find him.
Your reaction?
Oh, well, I guess I'd have to know more about the situation, but there are codes for parked cars that are not operable. So apparently, maybe that those cars were operable, and if you move them, every so often, you're okay. We have on-street parking, and there aren't a lot of regulations or signs you can't park here, especially out in front of residential neighborhoods. So, but if you do still have a complaint or your neighbor has a complaint, do contact City Hall and they'll get you in contact with the code enforcement team and help you work out your situation.
I know you had some things too you wanted to mention today as well. We've gone off on a couple of topics in different directions, but obviously there are some things that when you come in here, you've got some ideas that there are things that need to come to the public's attention.
Sure. This week is a great week, and actually, in talking about kind of the quality of your neighborhood and walking and trails, that's a great way to segue into this week's Parks and Rec Master Plan update. And so that might not sound interesting right off to people, but you know how we have the Canyon Rim Trail, and we just added that new section. If anyone has not been out to that Pillar Falls section, they should definitely go see it. The view is just amazing, and it's just out in the open, and so it's a different feel than the rest of the Canyon Rim Trail. Um, but what this master plan does is it designates where our trails go in the future and where they're placed, and also the different types of recreation that we have in the city of Twin Falls, what we prioritize and what we offer. And so right now, you can actually take a survey online. There's a link at the city's website, www.tfid.org. There's also a link from my Facebook page. And you can take that survey. But we're also having a meeting on Thursday night at 6 p.m., the 19th at Council Chambers, where people can come and give their input on that master plan and give their input on what they want to see as far as parks and trails and recreation in Twin Falls, which is really an important process to be involved in because as we saw a couple of weeks ago, there was a residential neighborhood that was being developed over on the Rock Creek Canyon. And currently there's not a trail designated along the top, canyon edge. There's one down inside Rock Creek. But if that's something that the community wants to see, it has to be put into the master plan. And that way it would be developed as the property is developed.
Of course, I remember hearing too, and I read this story in the newspaper a couple of weeks ago about one of these neighborhoods where the HOA has sort of gone dormant, and the neighborhood is having all sorts of issues where they're trying to get people back together and get them more involved. So it seems that no matter what neighborhood you go to, there's always a challenge.
Yes. And I hear, I'm not in an HOA, but I hear that they are quite the political challenge themselves.
Yeah, I actually sat on a board of the HOA where I last lived, on one of the boards, and you had most of us who'd sit around the table and we would nod our heads at most changes that were requested. But there were always a couple of people, well, gee, I don't know. And, you do learn that if you're working in a democratic body like that, that there is some compromise occasionally needed. It's not easy, though.
Right. Yeah, it's very complicated, especially the larger you get and the more people that you're dealing with. I know some people have a hard time. You have to get so many members to participate, so to speak, have a quorum, which sometimes can be difficult, to get that many people together when everyone has their own busy lives and work and schedules. So it is difficult. And the city regulates where they can. I'm not a big fan of overregulation on your private property. But as far as keeping things that are a nuisance or a danger to your neighbors, I think those are important.
And again, that meeting is tomorrow night.
Yes, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. At council chambers.
Okay, and so people, if they have an interest, can drop by. Next week, you're going to be on the rotation or off the rotation, right?
Yes. So there will be. I think it's every other week that someone comes on.
Okay. We look forward to seeing you. If someone does need to get a hold of you, and I know you mentioned your Facebook page, is that the best way to do that?
Yes, they can also contact City Hall, and they'll give them out my home number, or you can email
You really
me.
want them to do that?
Yeah. Hey, it's part of the job. But our emails, all of the city council's emails are also on the city website, so you can find a good way to contact us from the website as well.
So multiple choices that people have,
Yes.
unlike in the past, and they can do all three, I guess, if they like, but somehow they will get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
We want to say thank you very much for coming by today. Very quickly, too, you point out that there will be a decision in the fall then on the new police chief. Are there any other vacancies that need to be filled immediately? I know we've had someone just retire from Parks and Rec, right?
Yes, well, we do have a few vacancies coming up. We've been blessed with some long tenures at the city, and so we have some people that have served, 30 plus years that are retiring. And
I wouldn't know what that was.
yeah,
Like.
and that decision, the police chief decision, it will just be decided after the fall. So it's not set. We don't have a timeline from the city manager, but we can certainly ask him about that.
Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you for coming by today. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, sounds great.
All right, we've got a check of weather coming up in a moment too. I'll tell you right now. 76 by Friday and sunny. That'll be our warmest day of the week. Doesn't look like there's any rain in store anytime soon. And it's 42 at our studios on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Rebecca was telling me before she left that on Monday the council went ahead with a plan. This was a plan to charge $25 fee for a fee event. And so maybe there's a better way to phrase that. But the idea is that it will help cover some costs from the city's perspective, but she opposed it at council because she says a lot of your nonprofits that are involved, or not-for-profits that are involved in event planning, obviously even sometimes $25 can be a big role for some of them in those situations. So if you had not yet heard of that, that happened on Monday night at City Council. Hey, I want to mention my friends at Western States Bus Services, where they are now hiring part-time bus drivers, split shifts, 5 days per week. They'll train you too, by the way. We don't talk about that often enough, but they'll train you as well. Summer's off and scheduled no school days. The pay is $10.75 per hour. Apply today by contacting 733-8003, 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. 925, 43 at our studios. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. That means you can hear us anywhere around the world on the what they used to call the World Wide Web. Does anybody even say that anymore? You don't even have to type in www when you go looking for a web address. The search engines have all gotten much better about all of that. I saw a story this morning, and it doesn't really hit close to home, I suppose, but no matter where you go in the United States any longer, you've got these liberal school marms who are trying to control everything people do and everything people think. They want to control what you eat, what you drive, and it's gotten completely out of hand. Even Bill Maher, who's a very left-wing comedian, was complaining about this on his TV program the other night, saying that he is just fed up with political correctness. He believes it's ruining the country. So now you've got people coming from the other side, too, who are saying exactly the same thing. Daily Caller reports this story today. Public college students warned to check your privilege. Boy, when I see these stories, my blood just boils. Students at Appalachian State University in North Carolina. Remember that school, Appalachian State, a few years ago? They ended up trouncing Michigan when the Wolverines were really a hot ball club. They will be again once Jim Harbaugh takes over as coach. But the Appalachian State, which was considered a mid-major, if even that, Division II school, Appalachian State ended up just pounding Michigan about 5-6 years ago in one of the opening games of the season. Well, at Appalachian State University, students are being admonished by a residential advisor who is urging them to check no fewer than 7 types of privilege. This is because being born a white man means that you are already an oppressive racist. You know that, right? That's the latest in the liberal circles around America. I guess they want to eliminate us eventually. Maybe that's why. Do you realize what's going on right now with immigration to the United States? By 2040, they keep saying that Caucasians will be a minority in this country. There was a story I saw over the weekend that points out that the migration from Latin America is unlike anything ever seen in U.S. history. As recently as the Reagan administration, 80% of Americans were of a Caucasian background. That's pretty well gone now. I mean, with all of the influx coming from, and it's just been massive. Sometimes you look at that and you realize Lefty had a goal with all of that. Lefty doesn't like the current culture. Lefty believes if you've got pale white skin that you're bad just by your nature. So Lefty wanted to break that monopoly that Lefty perceived you had on the United States of America. So Lefty created this system in order to do it. The question will be in the long run, if you bring in that many people that quickly, all at once, if you can actually maintain the culture that you had for 200 some years. Because there is a difference here. If you have people trickling into a country within a couple of generations, they're pretty well assimilated. But if you have them coming in such large numbers, overwhelming numbers, then it's very possible they might subsume the native culture. I want to throw that out there. But more to deal with this story. The dangerous privileges to be checked off, according to the college resident advisor, were all listed on a bulletin board in the campus East Hall, and they included white privilege, male privilege, Christian privilege, heterosexual privilege, able-bodied privilege, class privilege, and even cisgender privilege. What is cisgender? It says a person is cisgender if their stated gender matches their physical sex. Well, I've known since I was a little boy that I was a man. That means that my perception of myself, because I can literally see it, means that I enjoy privilege that other people don't have. But if I had looked in the mirror when I was a little boy and said, actually, I feel like a woman, even though I can see in the mirror I'm not, then I'd be a protected minority. That's what they're telling us. Good gracious. I mean, when do the lunatics finally get put back in the asylum? 9:30. Bill Colley with you. Oh, there's more. I mean, there's a conference on white privilege in Louisville, Kentucky just wrapped up. Maybe I can talk about that a little later in the program. They think it's time to start teaching children in kindergarten about being nice to people who are gender queer. And that's a quote from the actual story. I'm not making that up. 44, 9:30 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I was talking in the last segment about how the United States is just being overwhelmed by immigration coming from Latin America. And No, I'm not sitting here saying they have a bad culture. Although you notice most of their governments aren't very strong or are very oppressive, and they don't respect what you might call the I think the notion that we are a nation of laws, not men. We're not ruled by strong men. Well, okay, we're not supposed to be ruled by people who run the country by fiat. That's just a temporary setback, I hope, at the moment. But the overwhelming numbers coming in here, and then I just as we went to break, I looked up at my TV monitor and there was a story on the news that said the Iranians are advising a great many Latin American governments. What are they telling them to do? Hey, send your people to the United States. Overwhelm the USA. I wouldn't put it past them. And yet we've got people in our government who are already cross-tabling with the Iranians who might be involved in this whole grand master plot. 9:34. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You could reach our show today at 736-0300. That is 736-0300. Tomorrow, we're going to have a conversation, another effort to give your country away. We're going to be joined by Arthur Thompson, the Chief Executive Officer of the John Birch Society. Tomorrow night, he is giving a presentation in Burley, and he's going to be talking about how this new Pacific Free Trade Agreement could cost you your job, and your children their jobs, and your grandchildren their jobs, your neighbors their jobs. And once again, we're told, yeah, but it's good for it. No, it's good for Wall Street. It's not necessarily good for you. And this whole, I support business a great deal in this country, and I take the notion that we have good roads, and we want good roads in the state of Idaho so that we can foster business, that we can move goods back and forth. That's a level playing field. But these free trade agreements, despite what everyone has been telling you, they do not benefit you. All you have to do is, I can look back and I know that my dad was working in a factory for a while in the 1960s. Well, in the 50s too as well. But he had a new car every other year. And when my brother, sister, and I came along, my mom left her job for a while and stayed home. We had a big 5-bedroom house. We went on a vacation every year. And as I say, every other year, my dad bought a new car on a salary of a plant millwright. That was all he needed to do. You cannot do that today in this country. There are so few of those jobs. Mom has to go to work. You can't afford daycare. You're just pressed. Well, government comes along and says, we'll cover the daycare cost for you. No, what they mean is they're going to pickpocket your neighbors. There's only so long you can keep pickpocketing neighbors to do that. You understand how that works. So culturally, we are under assault from any number of different sides here. Our own government, foreign governments, the elites in Hollywood, the elites in academia. And I know they think we complain too much about them, but frankly, they're all out of the closet now. Their efforts, they're not even being shy about it when they claim if you're a white male or a Christian that you have some privilege and that should be taken away from you. They're nuts. Also saw this. Associated Press. Idaho Republican lawmakers, and they mean some, upset with federal judges overturning same-sex marriage bans across the country, are pushing Congress to impeach judges who fail to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Well, there's a wonderful idea. How far do you think that's going to go? I hate to say it, boys, but this is a waste of time. Republican Paul Shepard of Riggins, who's backing the resolution, says recent rulings ending bans on same-sex marriage show that federal judges are adjudicating against the intent of the U.S. Constitution. I think what he's referencing is the 10th Amendment. But that 10th Amendment, whenever I talk to folks, the legal scholars, they tell me the 10th Amendment, yes, it's still there, but the 13th, 14th, and 15th really gutted it. Those were all passed after the Civil War. Now, they were passed for good reason because they were trying to ensure that every American was ensured liberty. However, they did not allow 11 states to vote on it. 11 states that were very much in support of the 10th Amendment were not readmitted to the Union until after this vote was taken. So it was census where you had 2/3 of the states. You had 2/3 of one half of the country involved in putting those through. There's also the counter-argument, which is coming from the same-sex marriage crowd, and that is their counter-argument. The Constitution says nothing about who can get married or not married. Okay, well then it should go back to local state legislatures and local control, shouldn't it? and they should be able to make the choice of the difference. Now, anybody out there under the sun can call themselves married if they feel that's what they would like to call themselves. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. Tomorrow, I could walk into the broadcast booth and tell you that I am blue, that I am no longer a white man, I am a blue man. I could paint myself blue. I wouldn't really be blue, but I could paint myself blue, and then I could go down to the law, and I could have my name changed to Blue. So I would be Mr. Blue on the air. And I could walk around telling you, hi, I'm Blue, and you'd all think he's a crackpot, but I could still get away with it. You couldn't lock me up for saying, hi, I've changed my name to Blue, and I've spray painted myself. I'm Blue. So why are we even having this argument? Because if you disagree, they want to force you to agree. They want to force tolerance. Tolerance is not a Christian virtue, we should point out. They want to not only get you to agree and to acquiesce, they want you to join in. That's where I draw the line. 9:40. 43 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. This is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Hey, look, we get a Republican in, and at least a Republican. Maybe we'll turn the courts around. In the effort to turn America into one giant carnival sideshow, there was a conference last week in Kentucky, Louisville of all places. My father was stationed for a long time at Fort Knox. I'll tell you what, when I remember as a kid what it was like around there, and it was a very conservative part of the country. My brother and I used to love the base because they had all of these old tanks in a park, and you could go climb them and pretend you were blowing things up. Ah, what a life. White Privilege Conference Workshop pushes grade school lesson about genderqueer and transgender folks. That is from the Daily Caller. Can you believe it? And they plan to use Common Core as the entryway. 9:45, Bill Colley with you this morning, 44 at our studios. This is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com online. And we have a telephone caller with us directly out of the break. You're on the air.
Yes, Bill, in case you've touched on this, I apologize. I've been unable to listen as much as I'd hoped. So, as the election, seems to be secured by Netanyahu, and the 2014 election was a positive thing, I get the feeling that the statists, the liberals, the communists thought that they would have more control over these people of America by now. And I really get the feeling that the frustration level has to really be building, because it just seems like maybe we are going to somehow be able to save ourselves, save the Constitution. And you can just never measure the spirit of the American free people.
Well, and I was talking about the Israeli election right off the top of the show today, and just pointing out, Mr. Obama has not congratulated. He's not made an effort to congratulate Netanyahu, and my guess is he's not going to bother to do it because he's got to sit around and lick his wounds for a while. The problem is, media is still going to try to sell this. They'll look for any point they can to claim that this really isn't the case, that everyone else is just as a flaming liberal as they are, despite the fact that we all know better.
Well, Mr. Obama had to choose his bracket for March Madness because, that was a priority more so than anything. Because surely he is, as people try to claim he's clueless and whatever, he's an anarchist. And he really does. I think when Rudy Giuliani said, "You really don't love America," that it cut straight to the bone, and it was as true as anything that's ever been said.
Right, and that's why the devil's minions all jumped up and down calling Rudolph Giuliani names and demanding that he must apologize. Well, when you're calling out evil, there is no need to say, "I'm sorry." I thank you very much for the telephone call. That situation with Giuliani, it's kind of died down now because he refused to give. And if that's what you've got to do, you've got to stonewall these people. But media, let's face it, they're mainly lightweights, especially the TV media. If they didn't have a blow dryer, they couldn't get their day started. The late Charles Kuralt said most TV anchors were a $50 haircut on a 15-cent head. And having been a television news director and had to supervise those people, I know exactly what he's talking about. and briefly was one of those airheads myself on 11 o'clock news, but it didn't last long. I got supplanted by the guy who's now the main anchor at ABC. I'll leave it at that. He was better at and resting his chin on his hands and those types of things. I was a little bit more serious about the news and, of course, less show business. I guess that's how it works. But media, all the way back when I was a kid, I remember when Gerald Ford became president, media had to rush out to show you that Gerald Ford had English muffins for breakfast. Wow. Now, if we didn't know that, the country would have gone to hell in a handbasket. And then when I was in high school, I remember being in the school library. I pulled a copy of Time magazine off the shelf, and there was a photograph of a young Georgia congressman by the name of Newt Gingrich. So I opened up the magazine and started reading the story about how Gingrich did not comb his hair. He just let it naturally dry in place, which gave him that helmet head look. And I thought, again, if we didn't know that story, if we weren't informed about that, the country would fall to pieces immediately. This is what news media does. They're a bunch of fools, and they think that we're fools. And they talk about foolish things. Except, of course, when you go look at the alternatives, Daily Caller being one. This story says, this year's recently concluded White Privilege Conference in Louisville, Kentucky, featured a workshop promoting lesson plans designed to teach children as young as kindergarten about genderqueer, gender fluid, and transgender folks. Gender fluid, that's what I let loose in the bathroom. No. America's elementary school teachers need to instruct children, they say, that it's wrong to, quote, adhere to the gender binary, unquote. Huh? The workshop presenters explained because, quote, the gender binary, unquote, creates more power and privilege in the classroom. They're nuts. Again, I can't stop repeating that this morning. These people are absolutely bats. They're beyond the pale. When do we take the country back? Meanwhile, the two women who were teaching this, I saw their photographs. Well, all right. I won't make any hippopotamus jokes. I'm just going to tell you that they have Facebook pages where their likes include Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Angela Davis, the communist radical, Community Organizing, Hillary Clinton, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, which encouraged that guy to try and shoot up the Family Research Council a few years ago. 9:49. Governor Huckabee coming up. The Huckabee Report is brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. The telephone number 736-6563. Again, that's Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. 736-6563. Governor Huckabee, straight ahead. About 6 minutes away from 10 o'clock and 44 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online at newsradio1310.com. Thank you, Governor Huckabee. Hey, look, one of our previous callers mentioned some of the problems with trying to overcome the deviancy in modern media. Media Research Center's daily list. Let me just give you some of these headlines. Number one, CNN's Christian Amanpour. She, by the way, is part Iranian. She attacked Benjamin Netanyahu as a right wing for being racist towards Arabs. Remember, the Arabs, of course, are trying to kill all the Jewish children, but that's okay. Number two, MSNBC denounces Netanyahu as a panicking racist. Number three, CBS and NBC bash Netanyahu on election night, quote, could destroy, unquote, chances for peace with Obama Palestinians. Didn't know Mr. Obama and the Palestinians were working on peace. 4, only CBS points out top Obama aide as working for defeat of Netanyahu. Okay. 5, only ABC notices poll showing email scandal taking a toll on Hillary. 6, network evening newscast failed to cover latest in Hillary Clinton email scandal. 7, Mika Brzezinski accuses Ted Cruz of deflecting after citing precedent for Iran letter. Number 8, CBS Evening News admits United flight passenger was screaming about jihad. Well, no, it was just airplane violence. That was all. Despite the fact he was yelling jihad and trying to knock down the door into the cabin and take over the flight and crash it. No. This has nothing to do with the religion of peace. There was a church bombed over the weekend in Pakistan. Many Christians killed, and I was reading up on it, and immediately there was a comment from somebody on the far left that said, well, this isn't exactly Islamic violence. This is just these are terrorists that do these things in Pakistan all the time. Really, and what would their religious faith be? Okay, I see. Yeah, but it's the religion of peace. Well, it just blew up a church. So don't give me that. We know exactly what we're dealing with. And you people are going to get all of us killed. There are so many tiny little Neville Chamberlains running around. Thank the Lord, as Mike Huckabee himself said, the modern Churchill happened to get reelected yesterday in Israel. And you know what? Some people say, well, this could bring on World War III if he gets into it with the Iranians. My friends, the people in that Islamic part of the world are already gearing up for the final battle, and they've been doing it for decades. We can either stand back and let them wipe us out, or we can go up against them and try to stop them. We might fail. But on the other hand, our odds of survival are a lot harder if we poke them in the nose before they poke us in the nose. I think we all know how that works. If you see someone coming down the street with a knife and you run up and you tear your shirt open and say, hey, plant one right here between my ribs, you're likely going to die. On the other hand, if you grab your Louisville Slugger from beneath the back seat, and as that guy comes rushing up with a knife, and you take that Louisville Slugger and it meets the side of his head, your odds of living have greatly increased. That's what these folks, these elites, and the politicians currently running the White House, that's what they miss. I don't know what it is about them. Maybe because they got pushed around on the playground so much. You got to remember, these were the people who were often slapped around the most and stuffed into the most lockers. And they just have an anger inside them. And it's got to come out, and it comes out in this manifestation. Rush Limbaugh is up next, following news from Fox at 10 o'clock. Also, Glenn Beck after news at 4 o'clock, and in between, Sean Hannity. He'll have a lot to say about this election. So will Rush as well. But yes, score one for the good guys. We don't get too many of those. Score one for the good guys yesterday. Let's hope we're on a roll. Also, tomorrow, joining us, Arthur Thompson. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the John Birch Society. He's doing a presentation tonight in Boise, tomorrow night in Burley. We also expect to have, for a good 20, 30 minutes, Governor Butch Otter on the air with us as well. All of that on Top Story coming up Thursday. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'm back in this chair. Bill Colley with you on Top Story tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as newsradio1310.com.